Power up. Welcome to Energypreneurs, where I bring to you the exciting new opportunities in solar power, battery, and electric cars. I'm your host, Sohel Hasni. I have been tracking and analyzing these technologies on LinkedIn and Twitter for more than 10 years. Now we meet on podcast.
Okay, so what I was saying, maybe you can just introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and then we take it from there.
Sure, yes. Okay. Right. So I'm a master's student at ETH Zurich, and my work is focused on the technical performance models for lithium-ion batteries in grid applications. So the premise for this work lies in the fact that energy storage is required for multiple applications to decarbonize the transport sector and pave the path for a low carbon emissions energy system. So since lithium-ion batteries are a multi-purpose technology, and we are rapidly seeing technical improvements and price reductions, this technology is playing a vital role in the energy transition. And of course, this is something that you've discussed frequently in this podcast. But as we know, progress and innovation in the energy industry is marked by trade offs. And despite the incredible technical advancements, battery lifetime remains a very important constraint to the viability of energy storage solutions. So, since lithium ion batteries are an electrochemical energy storage system, this lifetime or the durability of the system is highly dependent on the cumulative impact of complex electrochemical mechanisms. And this means that how you use the battery impacts how long you are able to use the battery. So I work on understanding this application dependence through technical models and understanding the implications of uh, this on stationary energy storage, second life, and vehicle to grid systems.
Okay, that's fantastic. So, coming from a technical viewpoint, that understanding how the batteries behave internally, and then you see the way the prices are coming down. How you see the impact on the stationary storage on the overall power industry? Do you wonder about that as well?
Absolutely. I mean, so the projection for growth for stationary storage is absolutely incredible. I think last year Bloomberg projected that from the roughly 17 gigawatt hours in 2018, we would see a growth of almost 3 terawatt hours by 2040. And of course, this integration of energy storage is nothing but crucial to the energy transition that we're seeing, because as we keep on integrating renewable energy, we need to solve this intermittency issue by decoupling production and generation temporarily. And then we also need to work on maintaining the grid stability. And I think so. One of the things that I've seen is that uh, this has been manifesting itself through this array of grid applications. And I find it interesting that there's a general consensus that four main applications are going to drive the demand for energy storage on the grid.
Mm-hmm.
So this I've seen mostly people discuss frequency containment reserve. So energy storage as a power application to maintain the frequency of the grid. Then wholesale arbitrage or energy time shifting, essentially to account for the volatility of energy prices because of renewables. And essentially this means buying energy when it's cheap and selling or discharging to the grid when it becomes expensive. And ultimately, this will help combat the volatility of prices. Then I see a lot of discussion around peak shaving, which is an industrial application where essentially industrial customers are able to reduce the peaks or the peak power consumption of their facilities by using energy storage. And then finally, I see a lot of discussion around self-consumption or in other words, energy storage systems at home, which allow consumers to use a higher share of the electricity that they produce on their very own rooftops using rooftop solar.
Yeah, you mentioned peak shaving, but that's an interesting dilemma. The peak and off peak is a concept from the world where we could not store energy. So
Right.
if our appliances start storing energy, then there is no concept of peak and off peak, no?
Absolutely. But I mean, yes, in an ideal world, uh, we would have a flat energy demand curve. But I think, I mean, we still see a bit of the duck curve. And then I think industrial customers are still seeing a very high variability. And then I suppose the way that we charge industrial customers uh, is also impacted by this because the peak consumption still governs the transmission capability that is required. So I think that's a pretty important role in the meantime
Yes,
for
but
energy
if you
storage.
have embedded batteries into the distribution system, transmission doesn't come into play, right? You technically can sort of absorb the rooftop solar in the daytime and pick that up some of the workload. So your duck curve effect really doesn't go outside the region, if you like, a localized substation, right? It goes into the batteries and then it comes back in the evening, no?
Right, absolutely. Yes. I mean, I hope that that is what energy storage in the grid will allow us to build towards.
Yeah, I think because you are inside the batteries in terms of your work. So how do you see lithium batteries competing against solid state batteries if they ever come online at a competitive price? Because a lot of people argue solid state comes in or many of the today's problem will be solved. Do you want to touch base a bit on that?
Right, absolutely. So, yeah, solid state batteries are definitely on the development agenda for most automakers. So, for instance, Volkswagen during their recent Power Day event discussed their timeline for how lithium-ion batteries will look for them. And so I found it very interesting that currently they are talking about maintaining a bit of diversity when it comes to lithium-ion battery technologies or chemistries, where the cost-effective vehicles will be based on the LFP technology, which we have seen a heavy integration of in China and is projected to also constitute the majority of the stationary storage market based on its long lifetimes. So this is generally touted as the low cost chemistry, but then for high performance, we need higher energy densities. Coming back to the trade-offs that I mentioned earlier, and that is where we start seeing higher nickel and higher manganese chemistries, and then solid state. It's still a bit in the future. So currently, solid state performance does not measure up to the commercialized lithium-ion battery technologies that we see right now. Of course, so the great hopes for solid state are that we can remove the limitations that are tied to the graphite anode by using a solid state electrolyte and removing the graphite anode with or replacing it with um, a metallic lithium, right? And this is really important from, I suppose, the perspective of my work, which looks mostly at battery degradation. And this this is essentially solid state is removing one of the key degradation mechanisms which limit the performance of lithium-ion batteries. So of course, in the long run, this will be a really important change. But right now, I think we are still 5, 10, or maybe even 15 years away from the kind of commercialization. And then we also have to remember that lithium-ion batteries are on a very solid learning curve. And whether solid state batteries are a continuation of the learning curve or will end up as a competing technology is yet to be seen. So I think this is another factor that comes to mind.
Okay, so solid state batteries you think are about 15 years away to be able to, 10, 15 years away to be able to compete lithium ion batteries head on. By that time, lithium ion batteries will be, based on the projections, close to $20 a kilowatt hour, right?
Right.
So then world is a very different place. If your battery is $20 a kilowatt hour, average persons consumes maybe 10 kilowatt hour a day in the developed world. And if you're $200 battery or $1,000 battery can store entire week's electricity consumption, you have killed all diesel gensets, you have killed potentially so many other things and so many distribution companies. It's unthinkable. Do you think about those world?
Right. I mean, that's kind of the dream. And I mean, so
Dream or nightmare,
in
depending on who you are, right?
right. But I mean, the way I think about it, the initial stages of, EV uptake and supporting the renewable integration in the next decade, this will be done on the back of the technology that exists now. So the technology that we are commercializing now, the technology that is going to drive prices to the cost of around $20 per kilowatt hour, that already exists and is rapidly improving. So I think the role of the current lithium ion battery as it stands is always um, going to going to be important. So yeah.
Okay, let me ask you a question. I mean, you did not grow up in that world. Your dad and I grew up in that world. When we used to write a small computer program, you have to declare small dimension, like we grew up programming in Fortran or something when you declared array because you didn't want to occupy a lot of memory space. Today, no one cares, right? Your file size is hundreds of megabyte. We used to work with kilobyte, right? So taking that analogy today we worry a lot about battery degradation and others because battery used to be $1,000 a kilowatt hour asset. If it's become a $20 kilowatt hour asset, like the storage today, nobody cares. What do you think? I mean, why do you need to worry about battery degradation? Is battery so cheap? No?
Right.
How do you answer?
So firstly, I mean, we are still a bit of a way from that. So right now, battery prices are at about $137 per kilowatt hour, and so I think 80 is probably the lowest price that we have seen for batteries in the last year. I believe it's from either LFP technology or the price that Tesla pays. But either ways, I mean, we are still far from the point where battery prices do not matter. And
Yeah, I'm
it's
just taking those
and then
forecasts, right? I'm just adding two numbers because if you look at Tony Seba and others' forecast, by in 15 years' time, when you're saying the solid state battery comes in, already lithium ion battery really gone down. 20 kilowatt hour is unbelievable number, but I'm sure we'll get there.
right. So yes, I mean, hopefully it will come to the point, but I think the place where we are right now, we still need to really consider how we use the batteries and essentially using data and accounting for battery degradation. It provides a really useful pathway for maximizing the utility of
Mhm.
the lithium ion batteries that we are deploying. Because right now, lithium ion batteries are associated with emissions during the manufacturing phase and during the utility phase. So, firstly, we mine the minerals. There's an emissions associated with that. We make the battery, emissions associated with that. We use it in the field, and then whatever losses we have, there are naturally, of course, emissions associated with that. So we really have the responsibility of ensuring that batteries are used to their utmost potential. And what any battery scientist will tell you is that the way that you use the battery is essential to how long it will last. And I think this is a trend that will continue. I mean, no matter how cheap your battery is, you will still want to get the most out of it. And then the second thing is uh, battery innovation is heavily marked by trade-offs. So I do not think that the trade-off between cost and durability will disappear.
Mhm.
So in
I think coming back, you do technical performance modeling, right? So how does the battery degrade? It's a sort of, it's not like not lumpy, right? It's a continuous degradation, right? There's a uniform slope going down, no?
Yes, so there are a few underlying mechanisms
Mhm.
to how batteries degrade, and that is essentially related to the interaction of lithium with the electrodes and the electrolyte. So, for instance, we can talk about loss of lithium ions, which is essentially lithium ions getting trapped into a neutral state where they aren't able to contribute to storing energy. Or we can talk about loss of active material, which means the places or the small areas in which lithium ions deposit get filled with something else or become inactive. And so essentially the capacity of the battery starts reducing. And so we generally what we see is that as you use the battery, there are side reactions and there are which contribute to these degradation modes. And slowly we start seeing that the capacity with of the battery starts reducing. So for instance, when you buy 1 kilowatt hour of battery and you keep cycling it, let's say you cycle it 1000 times, you will find that you only have 90% of the original capacity when you started using it. So while 90% is not a huge change, the other thing that needs to be remembered is that uh, at some point this degradation uh, increases rapidly. So essentially, for the majority of its usable life, the rate at which the capacity is decreasing is quite gradual, but then something changes. And after that point, which is generally known as a degradation knee, there is a rapid breakdown of the capacity of the battery. And that is the point where it becomes unsafe to use the battery. And it can lead to fires, it can lead to safety concerns. And so typically the way that the lifetime of a battery is determined is you determine an end of life point uh, at which you decide that I will stop using the battery because after this it's not safe to do it. And so up till now, the general consensus is that 80% remaining capacity is taken as the end of life period. And this is based on a rather dated standard from the US ABC. So now, unfortunately or fortunately, the goalpost is changing a little bit where we see stability until much later. So, in the last 5 years, we have seen batteries that are able to last reliably up to 70%. And now, with further improvements, we are able to even see batteries which perform reliably up to 60% of their initial capacity.
So this capacity is what is the depth of discharge, right? If your capacity to store that much, how much you can come back every time, like a glass of water, right?
Exactly, yes.
We used to call memory in the old alkaline battery days, right? Or nickel,
Right,
right?
right, right.
So take me through this. If I buy a battery which has a 10,000 cycle depth of at 80% depth of discharge guaranteed, or a 2000 cycle, depending on what it is. So you are saying it's first life use of that battery up to that 80% is okay. That's what the guarantee is, right?
Yes, but there is a bit of a caveat to this. So there are two ways or two things that we can measure battery degradation by. So the first is by measured by or utilization of the battery. So every time you use the battery, uh, you degrade it a little bit, and this is typically what is known as cycle aging of the battery. And this is really what we have focused on so far. But uh, the other aspect of battery degradation is known as calendar aging. And this is essentially just loss of capacity due to uh, the time for which the battery has existed. So even without using the battery, you are still losing capacity. And actually, if you look at the analysis for electric vehicles, a huge proportion of this capacity loss is attributable to calendar aging, because even when the battery is doing nothing, there are side reactions which continue in the background, which lead to a very stable but noticeable decrease in the capacity of the battery. So when you buy a battery from a manufacturer and it says 10,000 cycles, you have to keep in mind that you are not cycling the battery continuously, and some portion of the capacity will be attributable to just the amount of time for which you're using your battery. So typically, you will never hit the cycle range.
Okay, so like I think Nissan Leaf early days had an 8-year warranty. So you are saying that they take into account of both the calendar aging and the sort of use based
Yes,
age. Okay.
yes, exactly.
And I read many years ago that if you are sort of these, say, 2000 or 10,000 cycles, that's sort of like a fully draining and filling it up, right? But if you are doing short bursts of charge and discharge, that those cycles really don't count much, no? What's an
Yes,
expert?
so right. So that is actually kind of where the complexity of these electrochemical interactions comes in. So the way that so I'll just give a rough overview of what factors do impact battery degradation. So on the calendar aging side, it is typically the amount of time. So it's proportional to the amount of time, but then it is also the state of charge at which you store it. So how charged is the battery? Typically, if you have a very high state of charge, that means your battery is charged up to a high voltage, which means there is a high potential between the electrodes. And that means you have a lot of side reactions going on, which means your battery will degrade faster. The second thing is temperature. So the rate of the side reactions is also dependent on the temperature at which you are storing your batteries. So typically at colder temperatures, you have slower chemical reactions, which means your battery would be degrading slower. Then the cycle use ends up becoming a lot more complex. So as a general rule of thumb, uh, you typically want to avoid very high state of charges and very low state of charge. So typically, most commercial battery systems don't use the top and bottom 5% or even 10% based on how you design your system. So if you use a small window of the state of charge of the battery and you do very shallow cycles, those are much less detrimental to the capacity of the battery. So that is one way. But then you can also start designing algorithms around this. And one example I really like to give to understand this is how solar home storage systems work. So let's talk about a small solar home storage system. Uh, and let's talk about a sunny day. So let's say you have this battery and it's fully discharged, and you have a sunny day. So the sun comes up at around 7 a.m. and your battery starts charging because you don't have much of a load during that time. what you end up with is a fully charged battery by 11 or 12, and then the battery is just sitting fully charged for the remainder of the day because you still have sun, which is able to provide your load for the majority of the day. And then you only use the battery at 6 p.m. when the sun goes down and your load kicks in. Now, the unfortunate thing about this is that you haven't used your battery for the majority of the day, but it was available at full capacity. And as I said earlier, you don't want to keep your battery fully charged for the majority of the time. So, a more intelligent battery algorithm would account for the predicted solar irradiation hours of the day. And instead of charging with whatever is available, it would stagger the charge across the day, which allows you to maintain a lower average state of charge. And this way, you are actually able to improve your the durability of your system by even 10 to 15% or even 20% based on what kind of chemistry you're using. And this is still a very primitive system. And this is also applicable for electric vehicles with something that is known as delayed charging. So for instance, if you have a manual charger for your vehicle, you might uh, come home from work, plug in your car, and then your car gets fully charged and it's just sitting fully charged for the remainder of the night, which is detrimental to the battery. But if you have a delayed charger, it would be, or if you have a smart charger, it would be able to analyze the patterns and charge your electric vehicle only in the hours preceding when you require the use of the vehicle.
Okay, that's fantastic. So, and that's sort of some of the super intelligent BMS would do, I guess, right? Based on the historical data and use, and while they are
Yes.
charging.
So yes. So this is what a smart charger would do essentially.
Yeah. But the same principle will apply when you are discharging, no? You want to discharge between the cells, which is the maximum charge. You want to discharge that first. If that exists, maybe that doesn't exist, no?
So I think so. That's the purpose of the BMS, essentially to maintain cell balance. So essentially, this is coded on the pack level. But then what I'm talking about is the operation strategy on the system level.
Yeah, at the system level, yeah.
Yes.
So that means today, if you are not driving your car, because the car starter battery is lead acid battery, but if it's your electric car battery, you should maybe drain quite a bit and then store your car in a cool place if you're going for an extended period, no?
Right. Of course.
You
I
not leave
mean
it fully
that.
charged.
Yes, that is an ideal situation, but I think it is almost too much to expect customers to have that level of awareness. So I think it really comes down to designing the right hardware.
But then I'm just a bit intrigued, coming back to the what you mentioned earlier, that 80% is the point, then there's a sharp drop off on performance. Where do you draw the line? I thought that's when after 80%, that's where the second life battery begins. So you're saying I want bringing in batteries in homes, and that's has a fire danger because it
Right.
becomes
So
unstable, right?
yes, so that is okay. So 80% is so it's a bit of an estimation and it's a conservative estimation. And of course, when you're an automaker, you have to work with very robust warranties, and you have to consider the comfort and safety of the customer. So 80% is not exactly where this accelerated aging happens, but it is a rough point before which it happens. So uh, the problem with second life is, firstly, you have to consider why was the battery retired from its first life application in the first place. If it was due to the storage constraint, or the customer saying this car is not able to meet my requirement anymore, then it may still be worth it. But um, if we start seeing a rapid decline in the storage, that indicates that the degradation mechanism within the battery has changed, and that means that it is absolutely not useful for second life. So that puts a giant question mark on the technical suitability of second life applications. And then the second consideration for second life is when the battery is becoming available, because essentially a second life battery is competing with a fresh battery, which is cheaper and higher performance. So I think this health parameter becomes an additional challenge for second life business models to overcome, which is why I'm not very bullish on the second life concept.
But even on the first life battery, right? When you buy a car today, second-hand car, you normally would ask who the driver and make an assessment. In Australia, is very popular if it's a women driver, okay, because the car had a very good care. That's an assumption, right? That those sort of thing. Uh, so on an electric vehicle, when you're buying a second hand, somehow the system knows how the battery has behaved. Has it been left on full charge and others? Is that information somehow available from the battery itself?
So I think this is being developed in the form of what is known as a health passport.
Mhm.
And I think this is something that we should see soon enough, where the battery pack essentially is accompanied by an assessment of the state of health through some kind of testing. And for second life batteries, what this means is, after you disassemble the battery pack, you have to go through a testing phase in which you determine what the state of health of the battery is, and then you determine whether to send it further for second life application, or whether you have to recycle the battery pack.
Okay, but a health passport is very much related to vaccine these days. So you are saying the same name being used. So how will that work? Has there been an agreement among all the battery suppliers and chargers as to on the parameters of this health passport, the protocol established, or where are you? Where is that?
No, not to my knowledge. I think, so I think the second life is still very much niche, and I think battery manufacturers and cell manufacturers are much more focused on, driving battery pack prices down. And then I think we kind of see the same issue with second life as we see with recycling, that there are just not as many batteries as would be required to bring these processes to scale just yet. So I think this is something that we will see uh, becoming better in the coming years.
Yeah, this would be an opportunity for a startup or somebody saying, okay, you buy an electric car, add my gizmo to the car, and that would capture the history of your battery. And when you bring your car to the second-hand market, you possibly will fetch a better price, right?
Right. Yes. And I think the only way that we would see this happen is if second life batteries make a very substantial economic difference. Because the problem right now is that the cost of labor, the cost of testing, and the uncertainty associated with second life batteries uh, kind of they they don't make it a commercially attractive enough offer that people are putting serious thought into it, to my
No,
knowledge.
no, I'm not talking about second life. I'm just saying you just plain vanilla, you're buying a second-hand car, which possibly has done 50,000 kilometer. But depending on how the first owner used the car, as you explained, the health of the battery will depend, right?
Right.
So uh, right now, there's no technology to be able to tell you that other than the odometer on the car, right?
Yes. So I think we'll definitely see business models around assessing the state of the second cars, as you said. But then I think another interesting point that this brings me to is the impact of vehicle to grid.
Mhm.
So, vehicle to grid is something that I've been working on, and essentially, it's this concept of using using bidirectional chargers to use electric vehicle battery packs during their idle time. Most vehicles are idle for around 95% of the time. So if we have the capability to attach them to a bidirectional charger and intelligent charging infrastructure, we can use these battery packs for interact or for the provision of grid applications. So what this and the reason this is an attractive offer is because of the prospect of lowering the cost of ownership for electric vehicles, which is still a barrier to electric vehicle adoption. So this degradation question becomes even more important when we talk about vehicle to grid, because now it is not only the electric vehicle use which is impacting battery capacity, but also the impact of this grid application. And now we have a lot of operational parameters that we have to see. For instance, how many hours do we do it? What is the profit versus discharge, or what is the dispatch of the vehicle to grid technology? And so there's a lot of scope for improvement here. And I think we are seeing an uptake in this vehicle to grid technology from a lot of mainstream EV manufacturers as well as a lot of startups.
Well, so electric vehicle batteries can charge the car, and so you meet the needs of a car. Then it can charge the house. That's a secondary application. I'm just thinking, is there technology available today to do V2V, right? You run out of a charge, one vehicle can charge the other car, maybe with a bit of electronics, right? You should be able to charge another battery from with using other battery, creating some sort of potential difference somehow.
Yeah, I'm sure the technology could exist, but I I don't really see why this would have an application, because essentially you would be subjecting your first battery to an additional degradation.
That you take the whole range anxiety problem out. You can just wave your hands and give me 5 kilowatt hour. Right?
Right. That, yes, but I think this would be a huge coordination problem, and hopefully with better battery ranges and increasing energy density and prevalence of EV chargers on the highways, hopefully it won't come to this.
No, but technically, electronics wise, it should be quite easy to do. So I'm surprised
Yes,
that
yes,
no one is doing it right now. No.
yes. I think this may in part be because of uh, the small number of electric vehicles on the road. It's not very likely that you'll run into another EV user who is having that problem at that time.
Yeah, depending on where you are, yes.
Right. Yeah. But vehicle to home, I think, is a very promising application, because it tends to be the same people that have solar rooftops that also buy EVs, because these are your early adopters and these are uh, your climate futurists. So I think vehicle to home definitely offers a very substantial uh, business case, especially considering the scale of your electric vehicle versus the scale of your home applications. So, you have a 50, 60 kilowatt hour battery pack sitting in your garage. So, why would you not use it to use more of your solar home production if you already have it available?
I mean, other opportunity might be, so today, say, it takes you $5 to go to work if you are living 40 kilometers out. It's quite normal to spend $3, $4, $5. But as you correctly said, if you have a rooftop solar and if you have electric car, it could be the other way around. You come home early and you charge, by the time you have left, maybe you have a secondary battery in the home that charge your car battery somehow. So you come to work and discharge equivalent of 50 kilowatt hour and sell your $2, $3 worth of electricity every day. So bring that much to the grid, no?
Absolutely. I think electric vehicles can be a great asset to the electrical grid. I think we will, in the long run, see electric vehicles as a source of flexibility, which is much needed in the grid. And of course, it really depends what we use them for. There are certain applications for which vehicle to grid should absolutely not be used. So, for instance, one of the things that is repeatedly seen in my work is that wholesale arbitrage,
Mhm.
which is a very energy intensive application, should not be done through electric vehicles because in wholesale arbitrage, your revenue is directly proportional to the volume of energy that you charge or discharge. But since wholesale arbitrage is a long way from being profitable, even on a stationary system, when you do it on an even more sensitive vehicle to grid system, you see huge capacity losses because of it. So I think this is really where business models have to think from a point of view of what applications are ideal for these vehicle to grid and how can you create the best revenue streams for the customers that are willing to engage in vehicle to grid programs.
Well, when you say this is not profitable now, you are aware of the South Australian uh, Hornsdale power battery, which I believe from memory about 100 mega under 110 megawatt capacity, uh, and then 300 or 130 megawatt hour. That made a lot of money. I think investment got paid for in a very short period because it was buying from wholesale electricity market when prices were negative and then sold it back at a very high price. It was dispatching faster than a gas turbine, so CCGT. So, and then I think in Australia also there are a number of applications, apps that you can subscribe to. They can call on your home batteries and do a demand bid to the system. So those things have been profitable already.
So yes, I mean wholesale arbitrage. It really depends on the volatility of your grid. So I think this Australian case is probably a best case scenario. And as so the main concern with wholesale arbitrage is battery degradation. And of course, as battery prices reduce, battery performance increases, wholesale arbitrage will become profitable uh, in all or in most grid scenarios, uh, which is why it is being seriously considered as one of the applications that is going to drive
Mhm, mhm.
uh, electric energy storage adoption on the grid. Um, but yes, I think what you said through the apps. I think this is really where the role of information technology and infrastructure comes in into enabling the coordination problem, and then this coordination problem is also uh, visible in the vehicle to grid markets where essentially some sort of aggregation will be required to use the available vehicle to grid capacity for um, bidding. So for instance, frequency containment reserve is, I think, the minimum bid size in a lot of locations is on the megawatt scale, whereas vehicle to grid capacities are on the kilowatt scale. So these capacities will have to be aggregated, and so that will be another coordination problem that apps or information technology will be able to solve in the long run.
And you have the battery in the home, and then you have, of course, your electric car, which is also another battery in the house, right? Mm. Oh, that's good. Thank you very much. I learned quite a bit. Is there something else I could have asked you, did not ask? So, what's your comment to a wannabe entrepreneur who wants to get into the battery space? Of course, people will not have as much technical skills and knowledge that you have, but somebody interested want to do something for climate change, something into battery. It's a lot of interest. What do you tell them? What should they do?
So, so I think battery manufacturing is a very cutthroat area of the industry. I think it was on your podcast that Andrew Kahn mentioned that 90% of the capacity is or is manufactured by about 4 companies. But I think battery intelligence is a very important field and a very upcoming field. And so I describe battery intelligence as the effective and informed design of battery systems and operation strategies to maximize the utility of the systems that we implement. And this is a very important lever to improving the economics and lowering the emissions of the battery systems that we implement. And we are seeing a surge in the number of startups that are working on battery intelligence. And I think the good thing about this is that it is a very case specific problem, and it has the dimension of um, location specificity and technology specificity and sectoral specificity, which means that we will require a varied array of solutions to meet the battery intelligence requirements. And I think with more data available from the batteries that are being deployed, with better battery technology on the market, and with increased transparency from startups that are innovating in the battery technology space, I think battery intelligence is bound to boom. So I think that is an area that energy entrepreneurs should focus on.
Good. And then you're finishing your studies. If anyone want to partner with you, I'm sure you will be available or have interest, no?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, that's good. Good luck. Thank you, Varun. Really, thank you. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for joining us this week. If you haven't done so yet, subscribe to our show. Also, leave your comments and review if you enjoyed today's episode. Follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter at shasni for updates. That's SHASNIE. Once again, this has been Energypreneurs, connecting you to the innovative opportunities in solar power, batteries, and electric vehicles. Stay tuned.